Coach, Robert, I want to walk you back to the recruitment process of Kyle Hamilton, what you remember sort of about taking him out of Georgia and when you felt like, okay, this is a fit for us and this is a guy we have to have.
It's really one of the probably craziest recruiting stories around. A few years ago, I was working at North Carolina. We had a bye week, and one of my walk-on DBs said, "Coach, do you recruit Atlanta?" I said, "Yes." He says, "Well, if you get a chance, stop by my school. I think they have a player who's a pretty good player." He was describing Kyle. So I had some time. I stopped by the school, and coach signed off on him. Then you see the kid play and move around, and you're like, oh, my God, how can I keep this from the rest of the world? In the meantime, the season ended at Carolina. It was a whirlwind. I became, safeties coach here, and he was one of the first people that we reached out to get an offer to. And throughout the recruiting process, it was like the perfect storm. It was a kid who was very level-headed, knew what he wanted. Basically, at Marist, he went to a little Notre Dame, so it was already kind of set up for us. And really, he was a kid who kind of stayed strong throughout the process. Started off as 2 or 3 star, ended up as a 5-star. But the truth of the matter is he never really got affected by the process. He called me about a month before he went public and said that he was, coming to Notre Dame, just to not tell anybody. So that was my biggest challenge, to not tell anybody. And so I had to stay quiet for a month, and true to his word, he released it, and it was a big get for us.
Did you manage that?
Yeah, I did, because I didn't want to mess it up. So he knew that I was the only one he told, so I couldn't tell anybody.
And just his skill set, how unique is that? I realize you don't want to overhype a guy who has not played in a game, but there are things about him that seem to be different than other safeties.
Yeah, I mean, you have a guy who's 6'3", who can move around like he's 5'10", 5'11", and I think that's the biggest difference with him and other guys, is that he's so long. So he can play out there in some one-on-one situations and jump balls and have the ability also to cover a guy in a slot. So it is a unique skill set.
This camp, what have you seen on the corners? Who do you see as some of the biggest playmakers and kind of stepping up and filling that void left by Julian?
Well, obviously, you're losing a guy, All-American like Julian Love, you're going to have some holes to fill. But I think as a group, those guys have really done a nice job stepping up. I think Troy's had a pretty good camp, obviously going against a great down-the-field catcher like Claypool day in and day out. It really gives him an opportunity to sharpen his skills, and we've been preaching sharpen the axe all camp. And so I think he's really battled. A lot of the guys have been banged up at times at that position, but I think Tariq has come through and showed some consistency, really grown up, matured a lot from last year. And then the rest of those guys, getting Sean back, and Houston's been dinged a little bit. So I think all those guys as a group, we're going to have about 5 guys that we can roll out there and play winning football.
Terry, you referenced recruiting at Carolina and recruiting in Atlanta. Notre Dame's such a national program. How has all your various recruiting experiences, do you think, helped you and kind of helped shape the way you go about your job here?
Well, I think one of the biggest things with Notre Dame is that, we're more selecting than recruiting. You can go into the big cities, Dallas, Atlanta, L.A., and you really probably pass up more schools than you go in, because the Notre Dame fit is different than any other school that I've been at. And so you really have to be selective and choose the guys that you're going to go after and make sure they're going to fit your culture. And so I think that kind of limits it a little bit, but it makes you as a recruiter do a lot more research to know what you're getting yourself into.
And then Coach Kelly referenced the increased depth in the secondary. I know you've only been here a couple of years, but how different is it from when you arrived to where you are now, and how comfortable you guys feel?
Well, I think, when you look back at last year, Jalen and Alohi, they played probably above everybody's expectations. But at the end of the day, they played too much. And I think when we look back at the season, that was one thing I discussed with those guys, that the next step for us is to get better by having them do less, play less. And so recruiting takes a big step in that, of getting some guys in here who we feel like we can develop and grow and get them 20, 30 plays a week. And then October, November, December, and, January now, you can have, a group of guys that can play at a high level. So it's exciting to have more pieces. And, the players are fresher, the competition's better, and the overall morale is a lot better.